So I'm going to talk a little bit about NFTs and sort of how they're reshaping the modern industrial technology or economy. A little background on myself. I'm an engineer, a programmer, got a scholarship to study computer science when I was 13, so I've been programming basically my whole life. I was sort of on the founding team of Ethereum day one when the white paper came out. I was actually doing other digital currency things before that. Basically was involved in the very early formation of the more research side of Ethereum on kind of crypto economics and what you could do with crypto economics. I'm currently a fellow at MIT where I have a research agenda related to the future of decentralized organizations and kind of data science as well as a smart city data architecture. And another claim to fame I have is that I started MetaMask at DevCon 0. So that was, way back in the early days of Ethereum, and it's sort of relevant to some of this topic today because the MetaMask at that time was really the first piece of software that was bringing things into the browser world. If any of you were involved, probably you knew that you were downloading software, you were trying to install Mist, you were trying to install various other types of pieces of software, but we believed, and particularly I believed, that the browser was the way that people were going to be consuming dApps. And currently, we're kind of in an interesting shift, I believe, and hopefully I'll be able to show that some of the things are going back in another direction, where the amount of money that's being circulated is sufficiently high that we need more robust technology. We need sort of go back a little bit to what I would call as the fat client world. And I've done a lot of management consulting and a lot of educational work. And kind of consistent with my academic background. These are two books I wrote recently. One is on the kind of holonic system design and sort of nested organizational structures, and the other one is on the 12 greatest neglected thinkers of the 20th century. But going back to kind of DeFi stuff, so I think basically DeFi is on the track to eat banking. As we know it, banking is like full of banks, but a lot of them don't really do very much for the end consumer. You're actually generally losing money by having it in a bank because you're effectively negative versus inflation. Many things are sort of fixed game anyways. So if you can see kind of here, just looking at kind of the numbers, basically, out of the 300 billion or whatever, obviously the market's not doing so well today, but that the ETH market cap is. And then the actual TVL, key term, of the asset value kind of that's locked in DeFi markets is around whatever the 100 billion plus mark with a bunch of different things. And then, the total amount of active users and things with MetaMask, the project I started, is now approaching kind of Coinbase numbers. So a good time for DeFi, generally speaking. And then if you go to NFTs, basically we've had this huge explosion in NFT adoption and value, really led not by digital art, although the art is a very interesting component. But if you look here on the right, this is kind of the whale shark portfolio, which is a good thing to track because he tracks it very openly. You can participate through a DAO-like structure, whale token. But asset portfolio value is very heavily weighted towards NBA Top Shots, crypto collectibles, Flow blockchain, people that are kind of going really at a mainstream consumer market. And that's not to say that you can't get value out of, Super Rare or a Maker's Place or Foundation or other stuff on OpenSea or any of the other digital art pieces, CryptoPunks, hash masks. I'm, sort of personally interested in all of these things, but the collectibles market, and particularly looking at NFTs as they go outside into other industry sectors, is exploding. And you can look at that by sports collectibles. You can look at traditional market sectors like stamp collection or amulets or commodities. But NFTs is basically coming out and eating these things one by one. I'm also the minority partner on this celebrity agency. We represent a lot of top celebrities that are doing NFTs right now, as well as things like the Albert Einstein's estate, Thomas Edison's estate. So different kind of games, working with different blockchains, Wax, Ethereum, Binance Smart Chain. So very familiar with all the different things going on. Also kind of been involved with many of the top sort of DeFi hedge funds and kind of educating people. So if you're interested on the sort of more how to understand all the intricacies of the DeFi and NFT markets, go to 123mastery.com because every once in a while we do seminars. kind of like background. So this, I think, really shaping why NFTs are important, and I like to sometimes come from a little bit of a historical perspective. But back way before Bitcoin was this paper by Nick Szabo about BitGold, and it basically said, wouldn't it be great if there was a protocol where you had these costly bits that could be created online with minimal dependence on trusted third parties, and then securely stored, transferred, and assayed with similar minimal trust, a distributed property title registry. So like basically he's saying, hey, distributed property is a thing. In fact, in his sort of history of these things, Nick Szabo goes back all the way to seashells, other types of currencies, but it's looking way more than beyond kind of gold as a thing. And then obviously we have Bitcoin, 2009. Then we have all the colored coins coming on Bitcoin. Then, really in 2015, people start to create virtual gold, virtual land, on Ethereum. Ethereum was the first big project. Then you have, CryptoPunks. ERC 721 comes along, you have CryptoKitties. Then 2020 is when you really start to see the collectibles market come online from more traditional sources. You start having celebrities and people coming on, the Shatner cards on wax, NBA Top Shots, and then now sort of digital art, which is now exploding right now. But this is also to give perspective that this is not the only thing. So these things are coming in waves. There's a certain awareness of market adoption, but the core technology is also evolving, sometimes at a steady pace. It can be accelerated at time, but it's a longer process of where we get to. As well as each shift, we build things, but there's also building blocks that need to be built in order to allow some of the larger use cases to come online. So, and if anyone remembers back to the early Bitcoin days, you have this like ASCII Bernanke. This is the first time anyone put kind of art on the blockchain, because they put, Ben Bernanke, who was then the sort of chair of the Federal Reserve, up on there as both a homage, but also to the fact that we don't necessarily need to be controlled by these banks. Now, another thing that is kind of just I'm going to throw out here very quickly is just say, I don't know if anyone remembers this post from Vitalik back, but it goes through all of the different applications from DAOs. And it's both looking at the very core things where humans are very actively involved in driving decision making, but also things where AI and other forms of automation are driving decision making. And we're still just really scratching the surface of all of these things. So Vitalik wrote about them a few years. People built little bits of implementation, but once we really start to see full-scale automation through token-related structures, there's a whole giant new markets that are going to be built, and they're going to go into traditional asset classes and otherwise. So again, sort of magnification here of the kind of whale portfolio, but just to see that it's driving. All these are growing very rapidly, but there's this huge part that is basically kind of unlike anything we've seen in crypto before. And that is that these NBA Top Shots, the users, the people who are buying them, they are mostly new crypto buyers. They do not have prior exposure to cryptocurrency. They are not necessarily care about cryptocurrency as a primitive. They care about collectibles. They care about making money. They care about professional sports. So just sometimes it's important to know what's kind of driving that demand, and similar with the kind of celebrity type people we're dealing with, sports stars, whatever, they're bringing a lot of new market participants. Other interesting things people talk about, Metaverse is an app I built a while ago, but basically kind of into the kind of world of NFTs, as well as some like pyramid rate structures. We bring them to Burning Man, and a kind of interesting kind of thing that is relevant to these kind of big pyramids is that there's a whole burgeoning world of digital art that is totally underrepresented by the traditional fine art world. So here you have the kind of projection mapping, some of these detailed things, but effectively there is no space. So when we are talking right now, for example, I'm talking a lot of time in the fine art world with some of these people, the people who are the top curators of the fine art world and shoveling around hundreds of millions of dollars, they don't even know this exists. They don't go to Burning Man, they aren't exposed to this world, and those of us who are tech workers and doing really interesting things, we're highly aware of this, but it's an evolving thing, and there's obviously a lot of asset appreciation. As well as cathedrals. Like this is from the creator of Assassin's Creed, art director, and he's now making NFTs, taking some stuff, creating stuff in like voxel worlds. Just a lot of like interesting things that are popping up in the metaverse. And if you aren't like dipping into it, just know that there's a ton of different virtual worlds out there, a ton of different metaverse things. I think we're just really touching the very early stages. So what are we kind of building towards? Well, I'll just say briefly, you know, there's some things that anyone who's in NFT should just be aware of, that there are certain things that hold value in up and down market cycles, and they tend to be the ones that have a perceived market value outside of that, either through artistic merit or because they represent something that is usable, because they are, you know, intrinsically in some game world, or because, you know, someone has appraised them a certain value, or because it's actually a physical piece of land that you can go and walk on. All those things are there, and then obviously the technical innovative factor that exists for CryptoPunks and various other things. So this is a nice little thing of, I think, something we'll witness. You know, early ICO, middle, growing, kind of the ICO explosion in 2017, up to, you know, the 28 billion that happened in 2018, and then obviously there's like a big consolidation that happens. A lot of stuff gets washed out. I think we're kind of basically in between here and here when it comes to NFTs. So basically we're still have a lot of growth to be done in the current market thing as you're looking at different verticals, looking at various land. Yes, it can go down and things can get washed out and there will be consolidation like everything in crypto. If you followed a few hype cycles, you know how that works. But, you know, we're headed towards this, and it's going to be crazy, you know, like usual crypto world. So where does this all lead us? Well, you know, I've been doing a bunch of NFT stuff. I run a syndicate. We have, you know, stakes in various NFT platforms and, you know, hash mass and all that kind of stuff. But it's really led to Art Wallet. So Art Wallet is really looking at all the things I learned from, you know, being in the Ethereum community early, and some of the things that were born out of conversations with artists is that, first of all, they want to engage their fans. They want to be able to have exclusive NFT content that is available just to their fans, to the people who are purchasing it. They don't like Spotify and that they're not actually getting enough revenue out of Spotify. You know, iTunes was interesting back when that was there. But things that, you know, basically where the fans win and the artists win is basically where a lot of people want to be. And that, you know, if you look at NFTs in general, that stuff can go up a lot in value. There can be a massive appreciation. And there's also kind of downstream revenue thing that if you are a fan, and traditional say you talk about a comic book, you know, you buy a comic book and say it's 1,000, you know, limited edition comic book, you can then rent it out to your friends, you can lease it, you can share it, and there's other revenue streams that can come through that. So in some ways we're kind of winding the clock back, but we're also allowing this sort of global, you know, market to exist over certain things that didn't exist previously. So, and you know, another thing that's just basically missing right now, but I think is a huge market to be unlocked in NFTs, is audiovisual content streaming. So obviously there's lots of streaming sites. You know, what if Netflix, just to, as a very simple example, put out their videos and then said, hey, there's only 1,000 copies of these videos, you know, we're going to sell it. Whoever has the copies of videos gets to watch the streaming content, and then you can, you know, rent them downstream yourself. That's what many things used to exist, and it's kind of like a totally new business model. Like many things, I think there will be some kinks to be worked out along the way, but it's also a massive market. And if you look at, you know, how Spotify's evolved, various other platforms, you know, really just huge market for this type of thing. As well as the smart and access to this stuff. So I'm talking with, you know, a bunch of NFT art galleries, collectors. You know, there's a whole bunch of very specific knowledge that needs to be done for how these industries that are currently being transformed. And basically each one of these you could do a 30-minute presentation on. You know, what is the NFT market going to do to real estate? What is it going to do to metaverses? What is it going to do to various types of collectibles? You know, how are these things going to be transformed? And there's a lot of facilitating infrastructure that needs to be there, and we plan to be, you know, the largest and best provider of that infrastructure. So another kind of like just generally, you know, industry challenges, obviously, you know, Hacken is kind of a partner of this event, and they have a lot of experience doing security things. And there's just a lot of problems both with security and verification right now in the NFT world. Who owns what? Can you verify that they owe them? Is it a stolen piece of property? Can you make sure that it maintains secure? That's obviously something we're going to come in strong with. The ecological impact is a huge issue, particularly among artists who are already trying to distinguish themselves by doing something new that is bring something better into the world. locking the NFT content to a specific consumer. Kind of already addressed that with the streaming, but basically the ability to have the person who has the NFT be able to access. And so we're kind of working through the partnerships right now with other providers to make sure that there is, that continual ability. And then, a huge thing that I've seen a lot of people struggle with, and it's still a big issue, particularly, and goes back to the earliest point I made about DeFi and yield farming and all the tools are doing, but I don't think anyone has really nailed native cross-chain support in like a very secure wallet interface yet. And that in and of itself, basically will be the future of banking. In, whatever 5-10 years, no one is going to use retail banking apps built by the bank, in some fiat currency, unless you just want to lose money. So that's basically where we're going. And what's next? Well, I think there's a lot of development kind of effort involved in building all this out. And I welcome everyone to participate. If you're interested, I don't know, Nazar, maybe you can like wave your hand or something. There's some people here who are involved in Art Wallet. They're happy to answer your questions. And yeah.